to the PR Wind Down podcast, the show for public relations professionals who are ready to see real change in the PR industry. We are your hosts, April Margulies and Laura Schooler. Let's get ready to wind down. What, do you want to start with the horror story?
Sure.
All right. Do not open until podcast. Okay, here's the sitch. I am the agency point of contact for this client, and we're working with an outside partner for a client collab. The client is launching this super techy creative project, so we brought in this outside expert to help us execute the launch. It's very niche, and our agency white labels with outside experts all the time. So we have Mr. Expert and Mr. Client, and the ultimate PR catch-22. Mr. Client wants top-tier press only, but won't do a single interview or provide another spokesperson to do them. We are pretty strapped in terms of resources and have landed Mr. Client some solid trade press so far. But we keep striking out with the top tier ops because when reporters ask to get on the phone, Mr. Client won't do it. At the same time, Mr. Expert is promising Mr. Client the moon and the stars. Stuff that just isn't feasible to accomplish without interviews. Read Good Morning America? But he's offering us no new strategies to accomplish everything he's promising the client on behalf of our agency. We have made some minor mistakes on our end, but they have been small administrative things that wouldn't be a big deal without the added pressure of Mr. Expert setting expectations for Mr. Client that inevitably we can never meet. Anyway, Mr. Client eventually fires my team in the mother of all Zoom call blowouts. Secretly, we sign relief. 2 days after the great firing, all capitalized, the great firing, Mr. Expert emails us, I did it! I got Mr. Client to give us another chance. My team is pretty heartbroken. I won't sugarcoat it. It was an impossible relationship. Time to break up and let go, you know? So we finish out the month and decide to cut the cord. The lack of profitability and crazy attitudes of both parties involved were just way too much. My question, how can you decide sooner if a professional relationship is worth the struggle or better to leave behind? It's a great question.
I mean, it's, the same as a bad boyfriend.
So what's the word of wisdom for Laura on any breakup of any kind?
I'm not very good at that. Personal.
All right. What about professional?
The question is, how can you decide sooner? I mean, my first thought is, I don't know that they could have really done it any sooner than they did. Doesn't sound like it was something going on for, years or anything like that. So I don't know if it's really sooner. That's the issue. It sounds to me like there should have been a little more input between the team and Mr. Expert before client call meetings, so that Mr. Expert wasn't like laying down this crazy strategy that was not accomplishable. And that may have led to the relationship organically ending earlier than it did.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's what I have to say about that.
Right. So if there had been more dialogue between the agency and Mr. Expert in advance of taking on the client, is that what you're saying altogether?
Yeah, in advance of taking on the client, and when they realized that Mr. Expert would say kind of off strategy things or things that, the team knew they couldn't accomplish, that they should have then pulled him aside and been like, look, on client calls, let a member of our team lead, or if they hired him to be the lead, to say, do not promise the client any media coverage, because media coverage is not something that you can promise anyway. And then I don't know this other issue, but I don't really understand the client only wanted top tier press, but then wouldn't do the top tier press interviews and wouldn't give them another spokesperson. Mm-mm. So there's no way to, if that goes on for what would you say, 3 months, and you really can't find a way around it, then you have to say no mas.
Right.
But I still think it wouldn't have gotten to that crazy place had they sort of not let Mr. Expert, seemingly, to me, this is how I read this letter, kind of lead as much as he did.
Yeah, no, I think that's good advice, trying to get the agency to have a bigger voice in the initial conversations.
Or in the regular client meetings,
Mm-hmm.
Then, the team could have been like, if you only want us to get like these, whatever, 5 or 8 publications,
Mm-hmm.
which are not easily to get at all, and then you're also not willing to make yourself available, there's really nothing we can do for you.
I mean, unless you can do written Q&As or something like that.
Yeah, but not on Good Morning
like
America.
No. No,
you
that's
can't
crazy.
do that for TV.
No, definitely not. I mean, you can't even do that for a lot of the top tiers.
Yeah, that's more of a trade sort of thing. Yeah,
it's pretty tricky. So yeah, and it also just sounds like in general that the expectations of the client needed to be better managed. But I guess if the relationship is between Mr. Expert and Mr. Client, is that how you read that?
No, I thought that the agency had the relationship with Mr. Expert.
Okay. What a funny thing that they got another chance and then the team was heartbroken.
I know. No. Yeah, no, because it says it's very niche and our agency white labels with outside experts all the time. So they brought the guy in who then sent them on a wild, ride. So that seems very strange to me that they didn't have more control over their own expert who they had brought in to help on the account. I mean, their, VP or whatever who are on the account should have been leading the calls, leading the strategies, and not. And after one call with Mr. Expert saying crazy stuff about what we're going to get you or how we're going to do this, that was not accomplishable. That should have been cut off right after that call. The team, the VP on the account should have told Mr. Expert, we can't have you setting strategy on client calls because you won't know what we can and can't accomplish.
Yeah.
I, as the VP, will run the call, or I, as the account director, will run the call, and I will, turn it over to you on certain areas that you are expert in, and nothing more.
I agree.
We're paying you, bro, so you're going to have to do the way we say.
Right. Yeah, I think that's good advice. Donna is already in the waiting room.
All right, well.
So if you're ready, are you still eating salad?
No.
All right, here she comes.
I gotta get the salad out of my teeth.
Hello.
You heard that?
Hey, Donna, how are you?
Laura, I think you have some of the funniest one-liners on your podcast series.
Laura is very funny. Yes. All right. So our guest today is Donna Loughlin. She is the head of LMGPR Public Relations, where her team helps cutting-edge startups gain media and market traction with a sharp focus on the tech space, including AI, automotive, consumer electronics, and more. She's here today to chat about her roots in journalism, female entrepreneurship, and the evolution of the Silicon Valley tech scene. Welcome, Donna.
Well, thank you so much for having me to the show.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So I'm sure that Silicon Valley has continued to change. I know it's changed an awful lot since the initial tech boom, and then since even the show to Silicon Valley. But I'm curious in general, how do you think things have been evolving since the pandemic? And, where do you see things going in the future?
In the hybrid valley. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the term Silicon Valley is elasticized. It's an imaginary place with unicorns, feeding on jelly beans and having lattes, right? But I think people are making value-based choices on when they go to work and how they work. But I will say, even with that said, I'm exhaustingly busy. I mean, my personal business is up, 30%. So if I'm seeing that growth, I'm sure others are as well. But it really comes about continuously having and being able to foresee market opportunities. Because when COVID hit, I had a fair amount of consumer electronics companies. And I immediately thought, ooh, these products are not going to ship. They're probably not going to get chips. And where was I right? The good news is that's not the only part of tech I focus on. I have a lot of big boys toys and transportation, robotics, and things that, have 2 wheels, 4 wheels, and even fly, right? So I think keeping my eye on the pulse of what's happening in the market and the industry, as long as I have been, is really helpful.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
I was at CES when I realized
right before,
and everybody got sick in 100% of the people that I was working with got sick. It's interesting because nobody talked about the virus circulating through the petri dish of society at CES. But if you go to CES or go to any conference like that, you just know you're going to shake hands and stuff. Someone's going to get the sniffles, right? But I think it was CNET that wrote about like 8 months later about the proximity and how many
there was
there.
some conference, like a finance conference or something in Massachusetts that February, and like everybody got super sick and a number of people died. Yeah, I mean, you're in the same room, you're shaking hands, you're recirculated air, you're getting on the airplanes, whatever. It's like all of the
And are you still seeing an issue with consumer electronics given the issues with shipping?
You know, we have a shortage in a lot of things. I don't think there's going to be a lot of certain products on the shelf. I think there's going to be a shortage in game, interactive entertainment type products, anything that has to do with, I mean, computers, high-end computers are affected already. So if you go and look at CNET or Tom's Guide, and there's a lot of trends and articles already that are talking about some of the products that will be impacted. But yeah, I think it really comes down to, it doesn't make any difference if you're going into a store to buy a sweater, or if you're going in to buy some type of gizmo gadget. You might only be able to have a selection of what's available. And so adapting and agility are two things that we've all become accustomed to.
And are you seeing those consumer tech clients saying, I don't want to do any PR right now because I already can't keep up with demand?
No, in fact, I'm going to CES with a electric motorcycle company where we've actually sold pre-orders of 40 million plus in the last 18 months. Since CES 2020, we're coming back with a vengeance. But handheld consumer electronics, things you can put in your pocket. I have a couple other companies that are coming out with their first, pre-order products. That's where artificial intelligence was first revealed, and robotics and autonomous and the, flat screen TVs and all the things that the smart this and IoT, that all the things that we're used to. That's the part that gets me excited. I'm a tech junkie. It's interesting to talk about the legacy. If you go back to the dot-com bubble in the 90s, and consumer electronics shows were literally just blockbuster parties. And then he had a downturn in the economy. And then it was very cautiously like, well, the big box companies were going to be there, but smaller companies weren't. So then CES made it, easier for smaller players, and they created these small tech pavilions. I think that still exists. The biggest challenge, I think, with CES is the magnitude that it's got. It's literally, it should be 2 weeks separated from the emerging market players and then the big box companies. Right. There's no way, as a reporter, and as a former reporter, I didn't cover CES because I did business and economics, but that magnitude of a show, editors, they can't, they're leaner, they have to cover more territory, and you just have to be more selective. So obviously not everything is going to get covered. So I definitely think last year, the virtual scenario was not the same thing. It's like, it's like your birthday. It's like your unbirthday. You eat your cake after your birthday is not your birthday. CES virtual is kind of like an unbirthday, right? So, gosh, by the time we get to 2023, it damn well better be awesome. I think we're getting there.
What do you forecast? Do you forecast? Do you foresee?
Is she going to be a fortune teller? Is that what you're saying, Laura?
Yeah. Well,
yes, a PR fortune teller.
I give you my own personal tip. I am a very visual person. So I have my own virtual storyboard, a vision board or whatever you want to call it, a grateful board. Some people call it gotta have it board, whatever you want to call it. But every day I look at that visually back and forth between my office and my home office, and I visualize things I want to achieve. Specifically for clients, it also works is that we will create a visual board, and we'll put the logo, and we'll put the company's products, and we'll put headlines and magazine covers and things that we visualize. Because I think if you see it, you realize it, and then you achieve it, it does happen.
Well, first of all, I want to say I've never heard of anybody doing a vision board for work, and I love it.
I know.
It's so interesting. So you actually around your office have these vision boards for each client?
Yeah.
I love that.
The client doesn't see it, but it's magic. It works.
Oh. Do you have B2c and B2b clients?
I do. Yeah. Most of the businesses, I'd say 80-20 right now, but 2020, it was 50-50. And I visualized that I needed to move it. something spooky happened, I just said, okay, gotta move it.
And you did the right thing. Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like I'm part of an arts and crafts movement and not necessarily PR movement. It's like, if you don't have it, then you don't need it. And if you can't buy it, then make it. And I feel like that's been actually a really good, humbling approach to a lot of things. And whether you're a Gen Z and you're just starting out in the industry, or if you're kind of at the latter end of your career, I think everybody's just learned to be really creative. And some of the basic things like in storytelling is, I'm one of these people, do something old fashioned, pick up the telephone, have a conversation. What? I got to call somebody? Yeah. It works. Trust me. Right. But I think there's been a lot of what I call old school basic PR is actually everything old is new again. And so I think some of what we call it the gospel of PR, I was kind of having that conversation with one of my interns. And I said, it's kind of like going back to our roots. Thank goodness we're not stuffing, press releases and envelopes.
Faxing.
Yeah.
I always tell the young PR people that I work with, I used to fax releases. And then you call and say, did you get my fax?
What are you seeing change-wise? I'm just curious. Anything I'm sharing kind of part of the course of what you're seeing as well?
We're finding that it seems like everyone now wants a byline instead of a pitch or a pitch for a byline instead of a pitch for an interview. So that's something that we've been leaning into an awful lot.
Yeah, well, owned content, right, is become bigger. I think podcasts, byline articles, video blogs, those types of, if a client is open-minded, some of these, they're not necessarily new tools, but things that maybe haven't been a priority. It also helps keep the message on track too, when we can own that content.
Yeah, agreed. Given that you're obviously a successful female entrepreneur, do you have any advice for female entrepreneurs that might want to follow in your footsteps? Or what's your key piece of advice for them?
Women, we oftentimes have to do triple things. And so it's a little harder for us to make time to do these things. You can't expect balance. Agility is the word that I always strove for. Is like, I didn't have a family. I spent my first 10 years of my career as a news reporter, traveling extensively. I've gone to 80 plus countries. I've been there, done that. I've been in bunkers. I've been in tree houses. I just crazy things. And then I made a conscious choice that that's enough, right? And then got my master's degree and then settled in the Valley, which is where I grew up. But I never thought I would be back because I've traveled so many places, right? And then I made that conscious decision that, okay, I think I want to start a family now, but I'm going to do it differently. I adopted my kids from Russia. And if I have an infant, I mean, they were toddlers, they were 2.5 and 4. But at the same time, in order for me to do that, I needed to prepare and leave the corporate world and start my own business. And so literally I had 2 startups. I had the family homestead startup and I had my career startup.
Wow. And you did it at the same time?
Same 12 months.
That's crazy.
So no balance. And I remember the tsunami when I thought, I can do this. And at the time, 100% of my employees were female and a lot of them had small kids. And they were just like just great multitaskers. And I was so impressed. And I had that. And then I had clients. And I miraculously worked it out where I could have the balance between the AM was up early in the morning, like 5 a.m. East Coast calls. And then when the kids would get going, then I would get, switch my gears for a few hours and they would have activities. And of course, eventually I got some help. And I remember telling my team members, how do you do this? Because they had, 1 or 2 kids at home when they were working full time. So I had a great support system, a womanhood, a sisterhood at the office. But my number one thing is if you think you're going to have balance, and unfortunately we still do have to make choices. You're going to have to make choices to take time off really early in your career, or you're going to give it a little later and you're going to make other choices. So for me, it's been about agility and just, making the right choice for you. Now the kids are in college, so that's a good thing.
Amazing.
So I could do more work.
There you go. Back to working too much. No, that's great advice. Well, I know we've kept you. Do you have anything else you want to plug or anything else you want to say about your podcast or anything else you want to, we didn't ask you that we should have?
I think the one thing I wanted just to add about, public relations as a career for anyone who is considering to make a shift or just starting out, it's been a career that's been really good to me. So I think one of the reasons I created Before It Happened, and we talked about that already, is I wanted to share a lot of those stories that not everybody, I'd say maybe 10% of my guests on my show are clients. The rest are just people within my network or people I've worked with at some point or some other capacity, and they've evolved and they've become from, acorns to unicorns. And I love what you guys are doing because public relations is a great option, particularly for women. You can be independent, you can be a freelancer, you can be a consultant, you can work for a big agency. I don't know right now. I think it's a real challenge. The big agencies, I'm a boutique agency, but big agencies, how they're retaining talent because junior talent needs mentors like us.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think the sisterhood of PR is really important. But I'm on LinkedIn, and anyone listening to the show wants to connect. I'm just Donna Loughlin, and it's Loughlin.
Well, very good. Well, it was so nice to have you on. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Talk soon, Donna.
Okay, bye.
Thanks. Bye. Okay, so let's see. Laura, do you want to get into things I should have been trained on?
Yes. So there's a lot of things that when you get into PR, you just sort of get thrown into the deep end of the pool, especially I think at my age, perhaps your age, because there was really not public relations majors. I hear about them a lot now when I interview or hire younger people that they have PR degrees from college, but that wasn't an option for me. I didn't even know what it was. So there's a lot of things that you are basically trained on the job and you're actually rarely ever trained at anything at all. And you just sort of have to learn through osmosis. So what's today's topic?
Today's topic is how to write a release the right way.
Well, I'm very interested to hear what you have to say about that because you're a journalist to start with, and then you're a high-level PR person for many years. And now you own your own firm. So
what a setup.
What do you think the top 3 things that you need to think about or prepare for when you start a press release like from scratch?
So I would say, first of all, you need to gather all the information and you need to put it in pyramid form, right? So they teach you in journalism that you start at the top of the pyramid and you get progressively more complicated as you go. So you get to the nugget of it. What's the heart of the story? Come out swinging with one sentence that encapsulates the whole thing. And then from there, start to unravel it and go deeper into the details of it until you're at the base of the pyramid. So it should be the same in a release. One thing that I think people often, when they're starting to learn to write press releases, don't understand is that we write the quotes. So it's not.
You mean the executive didn't actually say that?
No. So you need to make up what you think he should say, he or she. And the best thing to do is once you've compiled all the information and you have it in one place, say, okay, which of these things can we say boldly, factually in the exposition? And which things are more opinionated, colorful, can't really be put in there without it looking too marketing,
right,
languagey, and flowery.
Like it was placed there, yeah.
So the thing that goes in the quote should always be the thing that you can't put in good faith in exposition, but that you need to say for the client's sake to say something that's more
editorial.
Yeah, or like has more of an opinion to it, or more of a hot take, or that kind of thing. So
I read that recently. Don't put data and stats and facts in the quote. Put that in the other paragraphs. Yeah. Put like the opinion, the point of view, or the position in the quote.
That's right.
What does this mean?
Because it's your one moment to say something that isn't really.
It doesn't have to be factual or like third party information.
Yes. So it can have that kind of flair and that thing that the client wants to say.
That was two. What's the
So
third mean? The
I had
pyramid,
this-
the quotes.
The third thing is this. It's still PR. Okay. So you're not just going to put all the facts down and let them speak for themselves. You still need to put on that strategic positioning hat and give it some flair, give it some edge, make it say, so and so company is challenging the industry by blah, 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 right? You still need to have in there something a little bit with teeth. In journalism, they always tell you to give it context, right? Put the story into context. Where does this fit in the greater world of the situation, the place, the industry, etc., right? Where does this fit? And then make sure that you write it within that framework. Well, the framework in this case is your client's strategic positioning. And make sure it's in there because you can. It's still a press release. They're
Mhm.
going to take some of that out of there. But if you don't give them that framing, that's never what's going to come out.
You mean the publication?
The publication may ultimately take your framing out of the news that
Right.
you put in the release. But it's
Right.
very important to
Right.
make it sound, even if it's not that exciting, make it sound as exciting as possible. So and so saves the day, right? I mean, we're thinking, don't make it too on the nose or too obviously salesy, but still,
Right.
like, you're still doing a sales job here, and this took me a minute to learn because as a former journalist, I wanted it all to just be
Facts.
I'm just writing the story. It's like,
Right.
no, you're still a publicist. You're still supposed to be coming up with the creative way of framing the story in the context of what the client wants to put out about their brand, their mission, their perspective, right? It should be kind of woven through the fabric of the whole thing.
Yep.
And like, you need to give it some of that pizzazz and that feeling of grandiosity without
Right.
it going too flowery. But don't forget about that because that's your job in public relations.
However, there are a lot of words that have gotten very much overused. Going back to the quote, we're thrilled to have XYZ. We're so excited to be part of. Nobody talks like that. The CEO didn't say we're thrilled. Don't say that. And you will stand out if you don't say that. Talk about why it's important, like we said. And similar, right?
This is a great example of our commitment to X.
Right. I feel like there's no need to even qualify if this is good. Of course it's good. That's why you're writing about it. Oh, it's great. We're doing. Yes, of course. Duh, yeah. Otherwise, you wouldn't be announcing it, right? I think diving right into why it is important. The market is going to shift based on our acquisition of company Y, because never before have two companies that do what we do come together to, provide new service to our customer base. We're so excited. It's so wonderful. Yes. Would you ever read that in a newspaper article? It's so great and wonderful that we're coming together. Like, just wouldn't do it. But I often lose that battle.
Yeah, it might not be the hill to die on. I'm not gonna lie.
I will
about
die on that hill. That is my hill to die on.
All right, fair enough. I wouldn't die on that one, but I would die on the, make sure that you're still using framing. Make sure that you're still thinking like a strategic communicator and positioning the client to be as sexy, exciting, grand, and impactful as they are/want to be. So you got to make the client look like where they want to go and not where they are now.
All right, that's a good way to put it.
So those are my three. What about you? Anything else you want to add in there?
What about headlines?
Headlines are very, very important. The other thing that I am starting to learn that isn't something everyone can do if they don't have a client with an SEO team or you don't have an agency with an SEO branch, but it is very, very important to make sure that the key terms for which people are searching related to that client are in the headline.
Right.
Even
Right.
if it doesn't get picked up that way, at least online.
When you post it on your
When
site
you
or
post
PR
it.
newswires on the web. Yeah.
Yeah. And likewise, you can always put UTM tracking codes for the hyperlinks. So
Mhm.
you can tell how many people clicked on the website for the company, for example, in the press release. Now, reporters are never going to use the UTM codes, and I would never recommend pitching them to press. But if they're in the press release, that's another way to handle it. Or if it's an even snazzier situation where they do have robust marketing capabilities, or your agency does, then I recommend doing vanity URLs. So making a URL specific to that topic or that news
Mhm.
that lives on the site. So it looks like it's part of the site because it is part
Mhm.
of the site, which is also another way of tracking how many people visited that specific piece of news without having the gobbledygook of the thing you see when you click on a Google ad on accident and it's like, trust relations agency and then 48 weird letters behind that are nonsensical.
Mhm.
That's what a UTM code is. So in this case, it would be trust relations agency / integrated marketing offering or something like that, right? So you have something dedicated to that news.
Okay. In terms of writing it, what if it's a very complex, B2b techie sort of thing that you don't really even necessarily understand? And we all have written press releases where we didn't even really know what we were writing exactly. Do you have any tips or tricks on how to sort of plow through that situation?
I do. I'm glad you asked that. I actually do technical writing still. I still sometimes do very, very techie B2B technical writing. So my trick for that is that start cobbling together what you do understand. Put it in a framework, even if you don't know what it means yet. Get it in English that you understand, even if you don't understand the concepts behind it. Start with it looking like you understand that it's in English, but you don't know what these specific things mean.
Mm-hmm.
Then just start Googling whatever of those things you don't understand. So maybe it's connectors for battery management systems for electric forklifts, right? So you go and you say, okay, first of all, what the hell is a battery management system?
Right.
Google it, read about it, spend 5 minutes reading about, okay, got it. Now I understand what that is. Okay. What's a connector? And Google that plus BMS, right? See what the hell that comes up with. Okay. Now I kind of understand what that means. Why do they use BMSs with electric forklifts? Google it. And
Mm-hmm.
then eventually, at some moment, when you've done enough reading and research on the individual components, at least two of those weird things you didn't previously understand will click. And you go, aha, honestly, it's just a matter of doing the research because usually, if you're just fervent enough about sticking to your guns and trusting that eventually you'll make sense of it, I think the biggest thing is not to panic. Because I think too often, if you get something like that, it's just easy to hit the panic button. I don't know what this is. I don't know what this is. I'm not smart enough. I can't figure it out. And if you do that and the
Mm-hmm.
panic button is creating fuzz in your brain, you're never going to get it. So the first thing is calm yourself down. Tell yourself I'm a smart person and I have the internet.
That was great. I think that this needs to be called out, particularly when we share this episode on social media. That was your blog post this week too about writing a press release, April?
Oh, that's hilarious. So yes, so we should also mention that this week's Trust Relations blog is actually all about headline worthy releases. And so we will link that in the show notes below as well.
All right.
Shall we move on to the PR news of the week?
Yeah, so we've kind of talked about this before, but there's just an interesting take on it today about how journalists are going beyond their newsrooms to make money, right? And we've talked about this in terms of Substack, newsletters, etc. But I'm going to read, it's a story in the Wall Street Journal, and it's a phenomenon that is continuing to grow. And I really feel like, and I know we've both talked about this and we're sort of excited by it, changing the face of journalism, which has to change for a few reasons. But anyway, So
Mhm.
journalists and writers with popular newsletters are a hot commodity right now, as media companies fight for new subscribers in an increasingly competitive user acquisition market. So meaning that publications are fighting to get readers to pay to read, to subscribe, or even just eyeballs who aren't paying and to look at ads and read their content, right? So Substack is, as we've talked about, getting a lot of really high-end, high-level journalists to join the Substack newsletter craze because they offer guaranteed minimum salaries, subscriber-based incentives, and also back-end support. And they also, I'm reading here, give health insurance, copy editing, and monetization. I mean, it's like you have your own staff, basically, right?
Mhm.
Now, Facebook is reportedly raising eyebrows with $200,000 to $500,000 offers to attract well-known journos to contribute to the Bulletin, capital B, its newsletter program. So did you know that Facebook had a newsletter program called
No idea.
Bulletin?
No.
And that they're offering over $200,000 to come be a high-level, writer? The last place on earth I want to get news from is Facebook.
Oh, 1,000%. I fully agree.
But if you're a journalist who's given an offer of $400,000, I mean, might be a little hard to turn down. Okay.
But then is
So,
Facebook gonna make sure they censor everything you're writing to make sure that it matches whatever they would fit their algorithms and things?
well, that's so funny. That's so right. That's a legitimate point of view. And my point of view is, are they going to have like some cockamamie nonsense news, coming from Russia or something? So whatever, either way, we don't think that like this is a legitimate news source, right?
The trust I have in Facebook or Meta is zero.
Right. So
Zero.
anyway, that's one interesting topic in here. And then the other thing is that the New York Times opinion section recently announced a major revamp of its newsletter strategy by consolidating popular writers into its digital subscription. In other words, fewer freebie newsletters under the Times banner, some more pay for, which I guess like if you have a Times subscription, it sounds like you might have to also pay for like your favorite newsletters. On Tuesday, The Atlantic announced that Galaxy Brain, the free newsletter published by the former Times tech opinion writer Charlie Wurtzel, will become part of its subscription. Oh, so Galaxy Brain will be part of The Atlantic. And it will be part, I guess, if you have an Atlantic subscription, you will get access to Galaxy Brain. So this is creating tension within traditional news organizations. Of course, if you're, writing with your buddies and all of a sudden one or two of you get offered $500,000 to go do a meta newsletter, there'd be jealousy. There would be like, oh, you're not a real journalist. There would be, I could see it could cause a lot of like
For sure.
cat scratch infighting.
I mean, what's funny about it to me is that I feel like the whole reason that Substack and those kinds of outlets became popular was because there was a trust there that they were more independent as journalists and were not being swayed by any market forces or powers that be or
Right.
advertisers or the 1% of the 1%. It was, I think that people are attracted to that because they feel the lack of trust in those major media outlets that they feel are in the pocket of someone. And so the question is, will they actually be successful taking them back under the umbrella of brands that people don't trust?
Like they left and now
Right, it's like an indie artist being super popular because they're not part of the label and they're doing their own thing. And but let's say then, those major labels went out and tried to find all these indie artists who were like cool because they were doing non-mainstream stuff and people liked them for that, and then going, cool, let's make you a star. It's like what made them popular was because they were
exactly what you said happened all the time in the music business, right?
so maybe it will work.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the nature of living in our so-called capitalist society, right?
I guess. Wait,
I mean, how many people really either A, can deny that kind of money, or B, are that confident and set in their independent ways that they are willing to like fight against almost all powers to remain independent. I mean, you've got like the Dave
Glenn-
Chappelle's or the Bob
Right.
Dylan's of the world. I don't know.
Yeah, Glenn Greenwald, Nat Taibbi, and then I don't know. Then it falls off. I'm not sure.
So Mr. Greenwald said his newsletter generates more than $1.5 million annually. Part of that goes toward paying a copy editor and research assistant and funding a freelance program. So he has other people writing for him.
I mean, that's funny? Isn't that about what I guessed when I was trying to figure out about how many subscribers he had?
I think so.
It might even be higher than what I thought, though. But it doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, I think we were saying like $1 million, right?
I was pretty off, but I was not far off, and then it was still a big
right.
number.
Right, you didn't say 30 grand and you didn't say 30 million. So I really think like this is where entrepreneurism and entrepreneurialism and journalism and writing cross paths. So writers who are entrepreneurs maybe are more likely to do this, or whereas a lot of reporters would have to be able to really write on their own terms or what they want to write, have to go off and write a book too. Now this is giving them their opportunity to not have to like either stop writing for the newspaper, or I mean, writing a book is such a huge undertaking. They can sort of like bring it all together and make money all the while instead of like, trying to sell the book or getting a good deal from a publisher. So I just feel like this is really bringing together many facets of business, entrepreneurism, writing, free market. I mean, there's just so many things converging in this phenomenon.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. What are some of the best independent acts that were, well, I guess Lady Gaga is probably the best example, huh?
Well, I mean, you had labels that were so underground indie that became, like Sub Pop or whatever. So but it's one of those things I feel like if people are like, oh, I knew them way back when, Def Jam, all of that, they all, and then they blew up or whatever. I mean, labels are not, they can't be what they were because the tech companies, came in. I mean, this is a little bit different because music is different than a newsletter about back-end technology.
Well, right, and there's a different need for trust and transparency in the media than there is in art.
Yes. Right. Journalism is a
higher standard of integrity.
Yeah, pursuit of truth.
Yeah.
Writing music, you do whatever the F you want, and it's still music, right?
Yeah.
Can't do whatever the hell you want. It's still called journalism, although
no. Well,
that's what we discussed, right?
Right. Yeah. Interesting. All right. Well, I think it's a very, very interesting trend. I look forward to seeing where this goes and if those things are successful or if they crash and burn.
So I had something else that I wanted to bring up. We have a few more minutes, right?
Okay.
And I realized it when I started working with agencies again, a couple of years ago as a consultant in-house at an agency. I realized it too, how PR client programs are built around the month. How many hits did we get this month? Oh, we only got one hit. Oh, we got to get more hits before the end of the month. And we got to put the monthly report together. And I find it so strangely limiting because, well, first of all, as we have experienced, things that you think are going to happen this month then like don't happen, and then they go into the next month, and then maybe they even go to the next month. But it's like this crucial thing that like stretches out. And a lot of things don't happen neatly inside of 1 month. And although somebody is paying you monthly, you might have gotten 25 hits 1 month, but that almost is all erased when the next month comes along.
Mm-hmm.
And I just find it very limiting and super like confining that you have to sort of run and judge yourself against this monthly
retainer
fence. Yeah.
I strongly recommend doing quarterly reports instead of monthly. So I think they're a lot more meaningful for that reason. Because all of the effort you put in October probably isn't even going to come to fruition until December, January. Right. So it's better to keep sort of an ongoing tally. It's also why I like the point system that we have, which tracks activities in addition to placements. So it gives clients a better understanding of the level of activity and the number of hours involved in doing the various things we're doing. So, for example, if we're doing award entries, those are time consuming. So we charge for those in terms of the points. And even though that's not going to result in a media hit
Right. It
unless
might not be
they,
for 6 months.
or longer, right? They might finally get the award. And then after that, we put out the press release and then the coverage comes. I mean, and there's no guarantee that will even lead to a story depending on
Right.
what the award is, right? So I just think it's important to showcase all of the other things that you're doing that are providing value, and wherever possible add those in some kind of metric of some kind. Even if you don't do a point system like us, which basically nobody does. I mean, if you have quarterly report and it includes the meetings that you attended, the advice you gave, the award entries you did. I mean, I think we're doing ourselves a disservice if all we're doing is showing in our reports the media hits. What's
Mhm.
the key message pull through of those media hits? Plus, what are all the other things that we did? Byline articles that we wrote, counsel we gave. There's all of like the 90-day plan we created, right? There's all these things that are very time consuming. Clients need to appreciate that they were part of what the budget went to.
Mhm. Interesting.
It's an interesting thing too, because it feels like, okay, we paid again, so what's our output for the
Right. What did we
month?
get? We paid in September. What did we get? Right. I mean, if you're having regular calls with your clients and regular emails when you do get hits, then you should know what you're getting. You should know what's going on and where you're trying to get. But just to like do the old, on October 29th, oh my God, we have to get another hit. I mean, it's just, and it's happened everywhere I've seen. I
Well,
never
and it
knew that when
happens
I was on the other side.
happens too before the biweekly calls or however often you meet with clients.
Right.
Everyone panics. Oh my God, we have a client call in 2 days. We need something new. We need something new. We need something new. We need something new. Like somebody pull a rabbit out of the hat.
Yeah, it's just so strange to me. And then what do you think about having annual plans or quarterly plans if you have a retainer client?
I think in theory, annual plans are better. I think in practice, they're a complete waste of time because so many things are going to change that all of the effort you put into it is at least the second half of the year is probably going
Out
to
the
have to be
window.
completely redone.
I feel the way if you do a 90-day plan that like by the third month it's already out the window.
Pretty much. Not always, but pretty much. So I think a 90-day plan is smartest. And that way, yes, things are
And
going
do
to
you think
change.
every 90 days you should put a new plan together?
Depends on the client. A lot of consumer clients, I feel like it would be a waste of budget because it's not that complicated, right? They're going to have the same holidays come up,
Right.
whatever new flavors or dresses or
Colors
whatever
or right.
colors and, shapes and sizes of things that they're introducing. They don't always know when those are going to happen.
Come
Usually
out.
when they're
Mhm.
forecasted, it's usually much later than they think. So I think in those cases, I would just keep doing it month to month like we do, where we've got, here's the deliverables for the month. Does this look right to you? Because even within a month, things can change.
I know.
I think for clients where you've got a lot of moving pieces, it's complicated. They've got a funding raise that they're going to close in June, and they've got an expansion, and they've got an acquisition, whatever, right? If there's a lot of big things that are going to happen, then I think it's more important because you need to figure out how are we going to space everything out or build momentum toward XYZ occurring in
Mhm.
February. The need for a plan just comes from a need to understand PR and want to control the process in a way that is sometimes controllable, but often not.
Have you ever had a client that like wanted to give you a bunch of money up front to work against?
I mean, like a 6-month retainer and they give you 50% up front or something?
Something like that.
No, only for projects. I've had bigger projects where it was
Right.
upfront or 50% up front or all of it up front, but not for a retainer. I mean, that'd be nice. It's not industry standard, so you might have a difficult time pulling it off.
It just, again, this like monthly thing, it's just funny to me. It doesn't map with reality to me.
Yeah, it is a strange thing. I mean, and I guess if you're a freelancer, you'd charge for what you did.
Well, and
So-
also, or a project, like you said, but also there's a lot of things that you may have done that month. You might have written 3 press releases. You probably did have 2 client meetings. You might have discussed a new strategy. But because you didn't get a hit, there's some failure. I mean, it really is truly, you have failed that month if you didn't get media coverage. Even though you may have gotten 20 hits the month before for some big launch.
I think some of that goes to managing the client's expectations, because if everyone covered the big thing, they're not going to cover them again. So then it's on the PR
2
team
weeks
to
later.
to realize that also and strategize. Okay, everyone did that. I guess who haven't we touched in the last 6 podcasts? Let's do podcasts, you know, or bylines. Let's do bylines. You got to think of something that's going to be, because you've got to have
go
the
to the same
foresight.
people every 3 weeks.
And you've got to know that, so you also can't set the expectation of the client you're going to keep pitching. No, we got to give it a rest over here. We've exhausted every tech and business writer we could possibly reach out to. Let's retool and focus our efforts here instead. Let's do media training. Let's do some other thing to give them a breather before we come back at them.
But again, every month you have to have hits. But I think that you're right about podcasts.
Switch metrics. I mean, or switch methods or avenues. Yeah, podcasts are an incredible way to get coverage for clients that they're pretty happy with. And there's almost always another podcast that you haven't pitched that you could go out to.
All right, well.
Or, you know, byline article, or come up with, okay, we need to do a white paper on XYZ that we can pitch, or we need to do this research report that we can pitch, or we need to generate something new with your budget that's going to be pitchable, since we, you know, kind of spent our juice over here.
That was a nice way of saying it.
I was trying to think of a nicer way to say it, and it was still kind of crass. But thanks for noticing the effort. It was a valiant effort. It was unsuccessful in execution, but it was a valiant effort.
All right, I'm done. I'm done with big ideas. The fruits and vegetables have exhausted themselves.
Okay, so what are you going to eat more fruits and vegetables, or are you done?
Well, I will eat the rest of my blueberries later, yes.
I have a sad old banana. Thank you for tuning in for the PR Wind Down podcast.
And thank you to Donna for joining us today for an interesting interview.
Remember to submit your own agency stories and questions, and share our show with your friends and colleagues. If you subscribe and leave us a rating, it will also help us reach new listeners like you.
And if you have an anonymous PR horror story of your own, send it our way at the contact email below the episode notes.
Can't wait to wind down with you again next time.
You know what's the biggest product that I found not available that's a huge issue?
What is that?
Salmon pate flavored cat food.
Oh.
Is that your cat's favorite, I'm assuming?
My cat growing up would eat any food that you gave her, but this cat won't eat anything except salmon.
What's the salmon substitute? Tuna? Is that called Fancy Feet versus Fancy Feast?